I think the jurors' lunch will be ready about 12:15, so we'll work till then. Anything else we need to address before I send for them?
No, Your Honor.
Just the rule, Judge, we'd ask that we invoke at this time.
All right.
Your Honor, I do one issue with that. I know we've already discussed the lead detective, and I think we've taken it up with that, but I also, David Tyler is possible witness for the state. I've discussed with him, I know he's working with the media and things like that, and I've discussed with him if there's anything involving, we're going to tell him if there's anything involving his work or anything like that really that's going to be necessary. As far as dealing with enhancement of a video, we'll let him know so that he does not look at anything or is not paying attention at that point. So I'd ask for an exception for that point, just to have him, if he's going to be dealing with the media back and forth and trying to mess with technology, I just didn't want that to be an issue. I don't think it will be.
He just stepped in the courtroom. Mr. Tyler, aren't you planning on going back?
I plan on going back today, if possible.
If possible.
If not, tomorrow.
You want to evacuate, is that it? So that gives a little more definition to the request by the state. Mr. Kilgore, what's your response?
I think it's just technical in nature, Judge. I'm not going to object to David coming back and forth.
You're fine then. Do what you need to do. If the state thinks anything is significant, when he's in here, step over and ask him to step out. And I think that'll work.
Will do. Great.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tyler. Bring the jury in.
Okay, all right. I think that still work. Please be seated.
We'll proceed with the presentation of the evidence in the case. For the state, call your first witness.
State would call Jacqueline Piper.
You solemnly swear affirm the testimony to the court of the jury on this opinion will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. Please be seated.
And, ma'am, would you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Good morning. I'm Jacqueline Piper. I work with the Cobb County Police Department.
Okay, and what is your title? Investigator, officer, or is it kind of a hybrid right now?
It's a little bit of a hybrid.
Okay, could you tell the jurors where you work with the Cobb County Police Department? What division?
I work with our gang unit. That's CAGE. It's a very intense unit where we work different hours week by week. So kind of whatever we need to do.
It's kind of self-explanatory, but as a gang investigator or officer, what type of crimes do you investigate?
We investigate property crimes as far as any associations with gang affiliations. In order to do that, we work heavily with other units, such as RCIUs, which is our property units, persons, which does robberies, homicides, and the like.
Okay. And during the course of the job that you're in right now, do you have the opportunity, do you deal sometimes with victims involved, or crimes involving victims, people who've been victims of violent crimes and things like that?
I do.
Okay, and so I guess in the course of what your job is now, do you deal with people who've dealt with trauma or victims of crime or people who have witnessed things like that?
Absolutely.
Okay. How long have you been in this unit that you're in now?
Approximately 8 months.
And before that, what unit were you in?
I was in our property unit, so our CIU.
Okay. So is this a promotion to go to Cage?
Kind of.
Okay. How long were you in that unit?
Approximately a year.
Okay. And before that, what was your job with Cobb County Police?
I was a patrol officer.
And how long did you work as a patrol officer with Cobb County Police?
Approximately 2 years.
And is that the entirety of your law enforcement career?
It is.
You're pretty young, so I would hope so. You didn't start at 16, did you?
No, I did not.
Okay. So as a road officer, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury a little bit about your day-to-day job when you were working patrol. What types of calls would you respond to, and things like that?
As a patrol officer, our duty is straight to the community. So we're going to answer calls for service. That's anything that comes into the 911 center. It could be anything as easy as like an audible alarm to things as difficult as an armed robbery. We also are tasked with doing traffic stops where we do encounters on the side of the road. We meet with people that may be suspicious. We also handle domestic disputes when people aren't necessarily having their best day.
Now, before you worked there, did you work in any other job involving a law enforcement entity?
I did. Prior to that, I was a 911 dispatcher. I worked in Cobb County 911 for approximately 2 years.
And what was your job as a dispatcher there?
I handled all emergency, non-emergency phone calls. I also handled calls for dispatch. We worked dispatch for Marietta PD, Cobb PD, and of course all the other entities that go through our center.
Now, are you post-certified, and were you post-certified back in 2014?
I was.
Okay, and what's post-certified mean for some of the jurors who may not know?
That's peace officers' standards and training. So to maintain certifications through the state of Georgia, that is our certification. You're required to take a number of tests. The training in Cobb County is pretty extensive when I went through, because we were required to take about 23 weeks worth of training. And this covered everything from DUIs, how to handle burglary calls, crime scenes. We had a very extensive week where we had to, of course, fight a guy in a red suit, which was very difficult to do as well.
Okay. Now, back on June the 18th of 2014, what position were you working in as a Cobb County Police Department employee?
I worked as a patrol officer. I worked specifically in Precinct 3. If you're familiar with Cobb County at all, that's the area that's around Cumberland Mall, Cobb Parkway, the interstates such as 285, 75. The new Brave Stadium is being built just north of Cobb Parkway from 285. So just around that area.
And did you receive a call to respond to a location over by Acres Mill that afternoon?
I did.
About what time?
It was the afternoon, around 4, I believe.
Okay. And when you received this call, where were you?
And to go a little bit further, it was actually not so much a call that would come through their 911 center. I actually heard an officer key up on the radio, and that's how I received the initial information. During that time, I decided to get lunch early because we get pretty busy during the day. And so myself and Officer Aubin, we decided to eat at Shane's or Rib Shack on Cobb Parkway, and that's where we were.
Now, do you remember specifically what time you responded to the scene?
It was in the afternoon. I believe it was around 4.
Now, as a police officer, do you do police reports?
I do.
Okay, and what are one of the purposes for doing police reports?
To remember the dates and times and so on and so forth.
Okay, and did you actually do one in this case?
I did.
And would it refresh your recollection if you looked at your report to give the exact time or what time you responded to the scene?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, Officer Piper, just looking at that, having looked at it, is your memory refreshed about what time it was you responded?
It is.
Okay, and what time was that?
It was, 4:24 p.m.
Okay. And would that have been the time that you actually left the restaurant you were at or the time you were at?
It would have been the time that I left the restaurant.
So about how far away were you, if you remember, from the scene you were responding to?
About a mile.
Do you remember about how long it took you to get there?
I've reviewed the video quite a few times now, and about a minute and 20 seconds.
Okay. And so you talked about a video. Were you recording that day? Was your patrol car video recording?
It was.
Okay, so all these times we'll be able to look at those and see how long it took specifically to get to certain locations, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, the place that you responded to, what was the location? What was that area? Describe it to the jury.
I'm going to first describe the area that Shane's was in. It's off of Cobb Parkway, right before or right after Cumberland Boulevard. So if you respond from Shane's to the incident location, you're going to go northbound on Cobb Parkway about a mile, and there's a shopping center on the right. It's Acres Mill Shopping Center, and it's located between Cobb Parkway and Acres Mill Road. In that shopping center is a multitude of businesses. There's a Sports Authority, PetSmart, in this case, Matteo's, which when I first started out that direction, I didn't know where in Acres Mill it was. But as Officer Gallimore updated his location, he said the backside of Matteo's, which is a location that I'm familiar with.
And is there another restaurant right by there as well?
There's a Subway and a Cinco's.
Okay, and describe Cinco's to the jurors. We aren't in Cobb County right now, so.
I understand. Cinco's is a Mexican restaurant. I guess they're getting some free advertising right now. So it's 2 stories. It's a pretty interesting venue because on the second story there's a patio area where you can actually kind of sit, enjoy the weather, and kind of overlook the Vinings area.
So in this area where you responded to, it's a pretty busy area with lots of people around.
Absolutely.
Now, when you responded to that area, what did you know about the call, or what had you heard on the radio?
I heard Officer Gallimore. That's someone that I've worked with day by day, even by the time that this had occurred. So I'm familiar with how he kind of responds during calls. And when he first keyed up on the radio, I could tell something was seriously wrong because his tone of voice was extremely stressed out. And he put out that there was a child not breathing.
When you arrived on scene, what did you do, and what did you see? What did you first encounter?
When I first pulled up, I headed towards Matteo's. There's kind of a middle entrance between Matteo's and Cinco's. And so when I pulled up through that area, I saw 2 patrol cars parked in a line. And then to the left, I saw a light blue SUV. Right at the driver's door, I saw my 2 coworkers on the ground by Cooper. And from there, I drove my vehicle to get as close as possible between their patrol cars and the blue vehicle. And I parked on the passenger side of that car. From there, I exited my vehicle. I could see a subject that was in front of my vehicle kind of pacing back and forth. My first concern was to kind of get behind the vehicle and meet with Officer Gallimore, Officer Folia, and see if there was anything that we could do.
When you exited your vehicle, you said you went around the back of it. Which car was this?
The blue SUV.
Okay. When you went around there to ask if there was anything you could do, were you able to see anything or on the ground, or any part of anything on the ground?
I saw Cooper on the ground. That was the first time I saw him. I saw that his feet were towards me, towards the back of the vehicle. His legs were stiff, almost like he was fixed in a sitting position. His legs were exposed. I could see what's called marbling in his legs.
And to you, what does that mean to you, as far as your experience?
Marbling, and I'm just going to describe what it looks like, and I'm sorry for that. It's where you can see the veins in the legs. They become dark. The skin is very pale. When you see that, I've seen that before, and usually it means somebody has passed.
At this point, what, if anything, did you do after coming upon Officer Gallimore and Officer Folia?
I asked if there was anything I could do. Officer Foley mentioned to me that because there had been quite a crowd that had gathered, that we needed to move them back. And so from there, I observed that we had a security guard that worked the area that was standing there, and we took the time to ask him to help us move everyone back from the scene.
Now, when you were there and you were doing that, did you encounter anybody who you found out later to be the defendant, in this case, Justin Ross Harris?
I did. As soon as I met with the security guard, I saw a subject in a striped shirt who was pacing the parking lot, and due to his demeanor, I thought that he was somehow involved.
And had you seen him before when you got out of your patrol car?
Briefly.
At that time, and then after you went back over there and you saw this person in the striped shirt, what was he doing? Or I know you said he was pacing and things like that, but what was his demeanor?
Specifically, he was on the cell phone. I noticed actually that he was left-handed, so he had the phone up to his ear, and initially he was just kind of talking to me. It appeared kind of calm, and then he started yelling. I don't know, I found it kind of unusual just because the only way I can really describe the yell, and I'm sorry, I don't have the words better.
Have you explained it to me a long time ago about how you would describe it?
The best way I can describe it is if you've ever seen Anchorman and you have Will Ferrell shouting, you know, I'm in a glass case of emotion. It's that monotoned yelling that just seems really forced.
Okay. After having seen that, did he go from times of yelling to times of being calm again?
He did.
During this time, did you attempt, I think you said you attempted to approach him and talk to him.
I did. The first thing I wanted to do, and we do this pretty much in every scene, accidents, domestic disputes, is we're going to want to know who we're talking to, because we know in the future we're going to have to write a report. So the first question I asked him is if he had ID, and from which point he pulled up his hand and kind of did this number like, you know, wait a second, or hold on, which Officer Folia saw, and so she came over to assist me, and she told him to get off the phone.
During this time, when he's, I guess, holding his finger up like that, do you remember what his demeanor was specifically at that time as far as how he was talking? Was he screaming, or was he low again?
He was low again.
Now, at that point, when Officer Folia told him he needed to get off the phone, what was his reaction?
When she told him to get off the phone, and first of all, y'all will meet Officer Foley, I think, at some point during all this. She's a very small officer, like myself. I'm 5'4". I think she's just around 5 feet. He, instead of, you know, just staying calm, took a step forward towards her, which I perceived to be threatening. And from there, we went ahead and detained him. We grabbed both his arms. Initially, he was pulling away from me, and I told him, hey, stop fighting. And from there, he complied, put his arms behind his back, and we used 2 sets of handcuffs to detain him.
Okay. And before he took the step forward, did he say anything when he was doing that? And I understand we just have to say it for the record exactly what language he used, as best you remember.
He stepped forward, and he said, shut the fuck up. My son just died.
So he actually said, he said, my son just died. Is that correct? Yeah.
I believe so.
Okay. So at this point, did you know what exactly had gone on? Or how it got to this point?
I had no idea.
Okay. During this time and before that, with the screaming and yelling, did you ever see him crying or anything?
I didn't see any crying. His face wasn't wet. Just the initial screaming that all I can really describe as being monotoned.
Now, you stated that you handcuffed him after he had said these things, and you also mentioned he was on a phone. Mm-hmm. Could you tell the jury, when you handcuffed him, while you were handcuffing, or sometime during the course of this, did you see or did you locate a phone on him?
We placed him in handcuffs. He had his phone in his hand. So when we handcuffed him, I noticed that the handcuffs were already on, and he started to move his phone into his back left pocket. As he began to slide it into his pocket, I wouldn't say it was fully in there yet. I went ahead and removed it.
Okay. And at this point, when you removed his phone, what, if anything, did you do with that phone afterward?
I immediately handed it to my sergeant. That's Sergeant Thorpe. He had just arrived at the scene, and to kind of clear up my hands, I immediately gave it over to him.
All right, I'm going to show you what I'm marking for identification purposes as states 226. And before that, when he, the defendant, told Officer Folia to shut the F up, was Officer Gallimore kind of nearby too?
He was.
And what was his response?
His response was to watch your fucking mouth, which was his response in the moment.
All right, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 226, showing for the defense first. Officer Piper, as you look at State's Exhibit 226, we're not entering this with you first, but do you recognize one of the items inside of that bag?
I do.
Okay. And is that the same phone that you collected from the defendant from his back pocket on June 18, 2014?
Yes, this is it. The phone was in the case, though. It's out of the case right now.
Okay, thank you. Now, Officer Folia, after he was handcuffed, you said you handcuffed him, you double cuffed him, I think, or I don't know exactly what term you use, but sometimes do you use two handcuffs?
We
Two
do.
sets. Okay, tell the jury why you do that.
Often, if we have a larger subject, we'll use two sets of handcuffs. We'll also do it with maybe somebody smaller, just in case they have some kind of medical problem with their shoulder. Maybe they just can't get their hands behind their back the way a lot of normal people can. And so we'll use two sets of cuffs. What that does is actually creates double the span to give their hands some room. And so we'll use two sets of cuffs often on larger subjects.
Now, before you handcuffed him, during the time you saw him, I know you said you didn't see him cry or anything like that, did you ever see him try to go back over to the child and get to the child and fight to see the child or anything like that?
No.
Did you ever see him or hear him on the phone calling 911 or anything of that nature?
I did not.
After you handcuffed him, did you speak with him? Or
I
did
did.
he make statements?
I did, and he did as well.
Okay. Could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that started?
Once he was in handcuffs, I walked him over to my patrol car. That's the one that was parked on the passenger side of his vehicle. I opened up the door right behind my driver's seat, and eventually he sat down in there, but he wasn't fully in the car. His feet were actually kind of dangling out, almost just like a chair. And I remember that he made a statement that he needed to call people, and I kind of told him, who do you need to call? He said that he needed to call his wife. At this moment, it was kind of confusing for me because I had assumed initially that he had been on the phone with his wife. And so he sat down. He said that people needed to be called. He told me that his wife was going to go to Little Apron Academy, which is the daycare of Home Depot. And he said that she's going to go there and he's not going to be there.
And based upon that statement, Did you ask him anything else about that?
I did. I asked what time he was supposed to drop him off. I believe his response was around 8 or 9. I also proceeded to ask him other questions, what his name was, what his date of birth was, address, phone number. I asked for Cooper's name and what his wife's name was.
And before that, when you asked him why he needed to call her, did he answer specifically about what he had or had not done that day?
He stated that he forgot to drop his son off. He made a statement that he had not done a double look inside the car.
And do you remember the exact language we used, or is that reflected on the actual video?
It's going to be reflected on the video.
Okay. But in some, he said he didn't look back or didn't do another look.
That's correct.
Okay. And this was all minutes after he is, as far as you taken from what had happened, the child had been taken out of the car, correct?
That's correct.
When you spoke with him, and you was there anything out of the ordinary about the way he answered you when you asked for him to spell certain things, or you asked for his address?
It was a little strange. You don't really see this a lot unless you're talking like on a police radio as like a dispatcher or an officer, but he used phonetics, phonetics being words that represent letters. So like for A, you might use alpha, B, Bravo, and so he used some of those phonetics to spell out his name and his street, which I thought was unusual because most people don't do that.
Okay. And in this, were there other times throughout this encounter with the defendant that he tried to make you aware that he used to be in law enforcement?
He did several times. Very early on, he referenced that he'd been in law enforcement. At one point, we get all the way to the headquarters, and he said that the handcuffs were different than from what he used. And so I thought that was unusual as well. I mean, all of these are references to law enforcement.
Now, with the phone, once you collected the phone from the defendant, who did you give it to?
I gave it to Sergeant Thorpe.
And during this, the time he's back in the car, what was his demeanor when he was back there and he was speaking with you?
He was very calm. At some points, just kind of pleading, to take the handcuffs off. Eventually, we asked him. I had to ask him repeatedly to scooch all the way into the car, at least 2 or 3 times, to the point that Officer Folia came back over and raised her voice and told him to get in the car, to which he finally complied.
Now, once he was back in the car, did he voice any concerns to you or say anything about his condition in the back of the car?
Yeah, he immediately complained about how hot it was in my vehicle. That day it was very hot out, and so I started my shift with cranking the AC up. I'm wearing about 30 pounds of gear with a bulletproof vest, so I'm not staying cool during this day. So my vehicle has AC. In fact, when I parked it at Shane's, I leave it running because there's a concern that if the battery dies, I'm not going to be able to get to calls. And so the vehicle's running constant AC, so when I get in the vehicle, I have a chance to cool down.
So was your vehicle cool at that time?
It was.
Okay, and did you then do anything else to try to help out?
I even checked the vents because I wanted to make sure that they were on, they were working, and everything was at the setting it needed to be for how hot it was that day.
After you got him into the car, did you do anything initially as far as the positioning of your car?
Sergeant Thorpe had directed me to move the vehicle forward, to kind of move it away from the initial scene. And so I complied in doing that. And when I entered my car, I noticed that my camera was still on, facing outwards. And so one of the things that I did was I flipped the camera view and so it faces inside the vehicle. And there's actually a mode, the camera it's built into our rear view mirror, and so typically you can black it out. That way it's not going to block your view or whatnot. And so at this opportunity, I actually flipped the camera so it faced inwards, and then I hit the menu button, which is what blacked out the screen, so it didn't show.
And with the recording, you said it had been recording first. How, in what direction did your patrol car and video record when you first arrived?
When I first arrived, it's going to catch my driving, how did I get to the scene, and so it's going to catch how vehicles were positioned. You're going to see a lot of the restaurants, and so an outward view.
So when you moved the car, though, away from the car, and I assume away from where Cooper was, where or where did the camera face then, or where was it recording in what direction?
Once I moved the vehicle forward, it started facing the interior of the car, so it's going to face the driver. It's also going to catch anything that's in the back seat of the patrol car through the partition.
Okay, now do you also get audio from what's happening as well?
I do. There's two sources of the audio. One is going to be inside the vehicle where that camera is. The other one's going to be a transmitter that I wore on my belt. It's a small little black box, and the only thing it's going to capture is the immediate area that I'm in.
And as far as in the car, is it clear what's being said in the front of the car as opposed to the back where the defendant was?
Absolutely. The further you get away from that camera and that mic, it's not going to catch as much.
So when you move the car away, I guess, from the immediate scene, can you estimate about how far it was?
I would say 5 to 10 feet. It wasn't very far.
Okay. Now, when we look at, have you looked at any photographs and things like this to actually show the jury where you were?
I have.
Okay, we'll talk about those in a minute. So after you moved the patrol car away, was the patrol car moved in a way that it was right beside where the child was, or was it on the other side of the defendant's car?
It was on the other side of the defendant's car. And I said 5 to 10 feet. It's actually probably a little bit further, maybe 20 to 30. I moved the car forward, I think a little bit past Subway, which is further from Mattio's.
And looking back from that, could you see the child?
You can't.
Okay. Now, also, at that point, what did you do after you moved the car? Did you stay in the car, or did you get out?
I got out of the vehicle. I met with one of the EMTs that were on scene, and he told me that he had a couple questions that he needed answered by the defendant, so I walked him over to my patrol car.
And at the patrol car, what, if anything, happened there when the EMT came up?
He started to ask Harris questions. Actually, before that, I rolled down the windows in the back so they could talk between the door and the window. And the EMT started asking questions.
Objection. I mean, that would be hearsay if she's talking about some conversation between the EMT.
Your Honor's effect on here, this goes to the conversation and the answers the defendant gave. Well, let me ask you this. Officer Piper, did you hear this conversation, and did you hear the defendant's responses to the EMT?
I overheard some of them, not all.
Okay. And would you be able to testify from personal knowledge about what the defendant said on some of those occasions?
Only what I heard, correct.
Okay. So, Your Honor, I ask permission to go ahead with this.
Well, if I may, can I just ask one or two questions just to make sure I'm
You can put out.
Okay. This conversation that you're talking about, he was in the police car, right?
That's correct.
And he was being detained,
That's correct.
and he was wearing handcuffs,
That's correct.
and you had not read him Miranda.
Judge, I'm going to object to the relevance of this. This is not relevant in any way to the testimony here. That's from a motion to suppress. And there's no reason to voir dire on that based on a hearsay objection.
What do you say?
I think it's completely relevant.
How does it have to do with anything with hearsay?
Yes, sir.
I think it's completely relevant.
To hearsay.
I'm going to sustain your objection.
Thank you.
You can proceed.
Thank you. Okay, so getting back to it, just talk about what you actually heard with the defendant responding to EMT Barber's questions.
The EMT asked questions about medical history. He asked a little bit more questions about how long Cooper had been left in the car. He asked when's the last time Cooper had something to eat. one of the responses that I did hear was that he had fed him breakfast at home, and that's really all that I can remember hearing.
After EMT Barwick got done, did the defendant at that point try to engage you anymore or make any other complaints again?
One of his complaints were that the handcuffs were too tight. So I opened the back seat of the car and I checked the handcuffs. The one that was on his left hand was double locked. It was the right kind of space between his wrists. The other one was not double locked, so what that means is that the hinges can continue to tighten. And when he sat down in the backseat of the car, I think they did get a little bit tighter. So what I did was I used a handcuff key, I loosened those handcuffs, that way they weren't cutting into his wrist, and then I made sure to double lock them so they couldn't re-tighten.
And at that point, did he complain again about anything in the car, the temperature?
He made a comment again about how hot it was in the car, and I told him that everything was as good as it was going to get. And he made another comment, and I told him that he was being detained, and he made a statement for what, and I just couldn't respond.
At any point during this time to you, did he ever ask to see his son or ask what was going on with his son or anything of that nature?
He never mentioned his son.
Now, when you said he asked you that question and you didn't respond, did you stay in the car or around the car, or did you go other places around the scene during the next period of time that y'all were out there?
There was, at this point, quite a few officers on scene, and there was still things that we needed to do. There was a DFAX worker that was there. A couple of detectives have started to arrive, and they needed some of the information that I had gathered, the names, the date of births. So I had, at one point, I know I met back with the EMT. I met with a DFAX worker. I know I met with some of the detectives, and kind of helped also with scene maintenance, helped put up some crime scene tape. So I was definitely moving out and about.
During this time, was the video in the patrol car still recording?
It was.
And since that time, you've gone back and reviewed the entirety of it?
I have.
Now, while you were at the scene, were there other people there? Civilians and officers?
There was.
Okay. Even though there was a crime, was there a crime scene tape or a crime scene area cordoned off?
There was.
And within and outside, could you describe where people were? Were there a lot of people, a few people, or something else?
There was a lot of people. There was people that had been eating, I would imagine, at the restaurants. A lot of them were kind of congregated around Maddio's patio, the subway exit, which is at the back of the building. There was quite a crowd.
And did you notice at any time the defendant's behavior in the back of the car?
I remember coming up towards the other two patrol cars, looking back at my vehicle, and I noticed that the defendant had completely turned around and was kind of looking back at what was going on.
And at this point, when he was turning back, did you notice any emotion on that occasion from him at all?
I didn't see anything like that.
At some point, did you come back to your patrol car and actually leave the location?
I did.
In between that time, had you ever spoken with the defendant again?
I had not.
When you got in the patrol car, where were you going to go?
From the incident location, our homicide robbery unit, they do pretty much all their interviews at our headquarters. That's located at 140 North Marietta Parkway, which in heavy traffic could take quite a bit to get there. So that's where I was headed.
Before you left, did you stop and speak with any detective on your way out?
After reviewing the video, I believe I stopped and spoke with Detective Stoddard. And then I stopped again to speak with Officer Gallimore, and then from there we headed up northbound on Cobb Parkway.
During the time you're driving to Cobb County Police Department, does the defendant, well, first of all, how's he behaving in the back seat as far as you could tell? Did you keep an eye on him, or how often could you see him back there?
I would check my rear view to just check back on him. He was just kind of like looking out all the windows, kind of nonchalant, just looking to the left, looking to the right. He was really intently focused on what I was doing. Every time I kind of reached around my car, he seemed to follow me with what he was looking at.
At this point, earlier, had he voiced any concerns about getting his phone or talking to people with his phone?
Yes. At one point, I asked him where his phone was. He said something about trying to find it and that people needed to be called.
And was that before you actually got out of his pocket during that kind of back and forth?
Right. It was all in like a 5-second span.
During that time, let me go back. During the drive at some point, did he attempt to engage you in conversation?
He did. He asked me how long I had been in law enforcement. I responded to his question, and at that point, I told him that I couldn't talk to him anymore.
Now, at some point, you say, I understand your need to talk, but, okay. Could you explain to the jury, let me ask you this. Did it appear consistent with somebody who just lost a child, him talking to you, making that small chit chat with you?
No, it was not. It actually made me feel very uncomfortable.
After you got to the police station, before you got the defendant out of the back of the police car, did you try to locate anything or find anything inside your car?
I did. I was looking for my cell phone. When I left Shane's Road Shack, I left in such a hurry. I left in typical police fashion. When we get a hot call, our food has just arrived at the table, and so I left everything there. I left the meal that just got served. I left my cell phone. I just didn't care, and I got out of the business. Okay. So when we arrived, I was looking for my cell phone. I figured I'd left it at the restaurant. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, so you remembered your phone.
Yes.
So while you're looking for the phone there, did the defendant ask you any questions?
He asked me what I was looking for. I mentioned I was looking for a phone, and he asked if it was his phone, and I corrected him. I said, no, I'm looking for my phone.
After that, did you get him out of the car?
I did. I let radio know that I had arrived at the headquarters. I gave my ending mileage, which is something that you typically give during transport. I then pulled him out of the car, and he made a comment about that these handcuffs weren't what he was used to. When
he made that comment, what was his demeanor? How was he behaving with you at this time?
It was a casual conversation.
When he brought up the issue, the handcuffs, how did you respond?
At that point, I assumed maybe he had worked in law enforcement before, so I asked him what agency or what department he used to work for. I think it was, I don't remember at this point.
Okay. And would that conversation also be on the video?
It would be.
Okay. What did you do after you got him out of the patrol car? Where did you take him?
From there, I walked him up the steps of headquarters, and I led him into our Crimes Against Persons unit, and that's where they conduct their interviews. And from there, I released him to the detectives.
Okay. And before you left, did you go anywhere else within Cobb County Police to see if you could obtain anything?
I did. I used to work up in radio, so I've worked with a lot of the people up there. I'm familiar. I knew at some point they were going to need some recordings of the 911 calls. So I went upstairs and I met with a dispatcher. Her name's Debbie. I used to work with her before. She was my dispatcher this day. And I asked her how many phone calls came in. And to her,
without going into what she told you, did you obtain any phone calls from 911?
I met with a supervisor and they began working on obtaining those tapes. I don't believe I may have got them that day. It could have been like the next day or so.
And did you listen to the call?
I did.
And had you spoken with the defendant before, obviously at the scene and things of that nature?
I had.
Okay. Was it the defendant who had made that call?
No, it was not.
Okay. And did you recognize the voice, having talked to some people, whose voice it was?
I did. The person who made the 911 call, I recognized his voice because he's the manager over at Mattio's, and I've had a few times ate there before, and I've spoken to him.
All right. Now, you talked about having, if you'd seen any photographs or anything like that. Would showing you some photographs of the actual crime scene, would that help you in telling the jury and demonstrating to them where you were during the different times these things occurred?
It would.
To show you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibits 225. And Judge, I'm also going to show what I've marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibits 3, 4, 6, 11, 13, 19, 20, 206, 21, 207, 208, 209, 210. And then also I'm going to show him, after he's done looking at that, State's Exhibits 211 through 221. Your Honor, while they're looking at those, I'm going to go ahead and move this around so we can move the screen. All right. May I approach, Judge? Thank you. Okay, Officer Piper, I'm going to show you first what I marked for identification purposes as been previously provided for defense and discovery as State's Exhibits 211 through 221. And then also the record, again, State's Exhibit 3, 4, 6, 11, 13, 19, 20, 21, 206, 207, 208, 209, and 210. I'm going to show you the first batch of photos, 211 through 221. Ask you if you recognize those photographs.
I do.
And don't display them to the jury yet. Just go ahead and look through them. We're going to look at them on a different media.
Okay.
Just make sure you've looked at them and you recognize them. Do you recognize those photographs?
I do.
Okay, are these still shots taken from the video from your patrol car?
It is.
Okay, and these fairly accurately represent the scene as depicted from your patrol car video?
They do.
Okay. Your Honor, I would tender State's Exhibit 211 through 221 at this time.
No objection.
They're admitted.
Also, the exhibits I talked about, these other ones that I've already listed for the record. Ask you, have you looked at these earlier today as well?
I have.
Okay, just look through them again and let me know that you recognize those, and if so, how you recognize them.
I recognize all these photos. They were taken either by Sergeant Harris or one of our crime scene technicians. And I looked at these today and in the past.
Okay. And those fairly accurately also represent the scene as you saw it that day, either before the crime scene tech arrived or after.
They do.
Okay. Your Honor, I tender State's Exhibits 3, 4, 6, 11, 13, 19, 20, 21, 206, 207, 208, 209, and 210.
No objection.
Admitted.
And finally, I'm going to get to this. Showing you State's Exhibit 225, you recognize that?
I do. This is a flash drive that it contains my video, also a video that has, I guess, been enhanced a little bit so you can hear and see subtitles. My initials are on the back of the flash drive. I reviewed these today.
Well, the video. Let me show you the videos. Did you review a flash drive with photographs as well?
I did.
Okay. And is that the photograph flash drive?
It is.
Okay. Your Honor, I would tender State's Exhibit 225 at this time.
It's just the one with the photos, Mr.
It's
Moore?
just the one with the photos.
It was all on the same screen. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Okay. And did you review these and make sure that the photographs that were on this flash drive were the same ones as depicted here in these other exhibits that have been admitted?
They are.
Okay. Your Honor, I tender State's Exhibit 225 at this time.
Admitted.
And permission to publish State's Exhibit 225, Judge?
You may.
And Judge,
Yes, sir.
we're completely blocked out. Is it okay if we just kind of have leave to kind of come and go to see the screen if we need to?
Yes, sir. It's just a problem that we're all going to have to work around.
And Mr. Harris is not able to see the screen from where he is. Might there be some mechanism where he will be able to see him as well?
Your Honor, yesterday they actually had the screen up over there where they could see what was on the screen. I assume they still have that up today.
What about that?
I didn't have the screen up. I'm not sure.
Mr. Rodriguez did, I think, where he could see it. And so that's what I assume is still going on.
Do you have that, Mr. Rodriguez?
I don't, and I can if I'm working on other things while the testimony
You
is
don't have
going
another
on.
computer?
I'm sorry,
You don't have another computer?
this is the only one that's got the whole case file on it.
Well, push the thing back,
Okay.
and y'all just need to move Ms. Harris to Mr. Phillips' seat.
And Your Honor, I have permission for Officer Piper to step down.
You may.
Thank you. Step down for a second, Officer Piper, so we can get through these photos.
Just don't get in the way of the jury, you need to find Mr. Lumpkin.
I don't think the jurors are going to be able to see it from the same. Can the jurors all see you on this side? Well,
Not as good as it was when it was up close.
Don't have to do the best you can. I know. But you were asked, so you might as well tell them, speak up. Precisely.
is that better? Yes. All right. Okay. So,
Is this a new one? Okay. So you can see? Okay, they all responded. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Deputy.
all right. All right, Officer Piper, looking at what was pictured, State's Exhibit 3, do you recognize this photo? Or did you recognize that photo? All right, do you recognize it now?
I do.
Okay. Would you tell us how you recognize it?
I recognize this photo. I've been at this location many times before this incident, after this incident. That's why I recognize it.
Okay. I'm going to circle a couple of things on the screen, and I want you to tell the jury what it is we're looking at, okay? First, right there, what is that? What is that building?
That is Mattio's. What's circled is the sign to Mattio's, the neon lights that you can see during the day and at night.
Okay. Now, over here in this area, what is the building that's over here?
The building that's obscured a little bit by those trees, that's going to be Cinco's. That's the Mexican restaurant that I described for y'all earlier. It's going to be a 2-story building with the patio that faces out this direction.
Now, when you're talking about officers and things at the scene, do you see officers and crowds around the scene at this location?
I do.
Okay. Now, this vehicle right here, could you tell the jury what vehicle is that regarding this investigation?
That is the blue, I believe it's a Hyundai. I'm not great with vehicles, but that's Mr. Harris's car that was there that day.
Go to the next picture. It's going to be State's Exhibit 4. Okay, is this the same area you were talking about before as well, but just from a different angle?
It is.
Could you tell the jury this right here, what's that depicted where I have the circle right now?
That is Sergeant Harris, his patrol vehicle.
Okay, and why was that car moved to that location?
It was moved, I imagine, for 2 reasons. It blocked view to that driver's side of that vehicle, and also to block the view of anybody who could come out of those businesses and my patrol car.
Now, right here, is in this area on this photograph, is it depicted where you initially pulled your patrol car? Is that area depicted?
It is.
Okay, could you just draw a little X where it was, well, where the picture was? Why don't you just do it now? There you go.
Well, ignoring that, my vehicle was right about here.
Okay.
Not on the curb, though.
All right. Can everybody see that? Interesting. doing things that I have never seen it do before. All right. You know what, Judge? I'm just going to put this in a different format for now. Just do it like this.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, Detective, this was State's Exhibit 3, correct?
That's correct.
State's Exhibit 4. Now, going to State's Exhibit 6. Okay, what is depicted here?
A couple of things. This is going to be the defendant's vehicle here on the right. You also have a patrol vehicle that has since moved from some of those photos to, again, block the view from, there's a camera right there, some crowds. There's a white sheet that we borrowed from, I believe it was either Metro or our fire department to also try to block the view. It looks like some fire equipment that's there. And we've also used this crime scene tape to secure the area.
And can you see, just barely to the left there, something white by the tire?
That's the white sheet that we used to drape over Cooper.
Okay. And so is that what you see right here at the bottom left?
It is.
And the driver's side door?
The only thing I remember is this door being open.
Is that the only door open in this particular photograph?
It is.
Now going to some photographs that were taken before the photographs we just saw. Is your patrol car visible in this photograph?
It is.
Okay, could you show the jury where your patrol car is, where Mr. Harris was seated?
I can reach it. It's, that's my patrol car. That's the vehicle I was driving that day. The blue lights, in fact, are the blue lights that I turned on when I first began driving up Cobb Parkway.
Okay. And again, looking back at this from these earlier photographs, can you see officers still on scene over there toward where your patrol car would have been and things of that nature up in the upper right?
I can.
Okay, and is Cooper's body depicted in these older photographs or earlier photographs as well?
He is.
And State's Exhibit 208, is that also a different angle from the earlier set of photographs?
Correct.
And in that photograph, is that also State's 209, another photograph from the earlier set of photographs that were taken before the ones that we looked at first?
That's correct.
And in this photograph, last State's Exhibit 210, I know you talked about having left the car to go do other things, talk to officers, talk to people. Was it something where the defendant was just free to run around or anything like that?
No, he was not.
Okay. Were other officers over there near the car and things of that nature when you went around the scene to talk to other people?
I believe so.
Okay. And are you actually in this photograph? And if so, can you point to about where you are?
I can.
Okay.
That's going to be me right there, standing to the right of Officer Gallimore near the business of Mattios.
Thank you. You can have your seat.
Thank you.
Is now a good time for break?
It is, Judge.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a lunch break. It's going to be prepared for you when it's available. Both notepads, take them with you, leave them in your jury room, keep an open mind. Do not discuss this matter with each other at all. Enjoy each other's company. You're excused.
Let's all rise for the jury, please. Please watch your step going down.
We'll break till 1:30.
Break to 1:30. That's fine. We'll move it. Those photos been omitted yet? Photos, they've been omitted.
Yeah,
The clerk.
They're right there. Yeah.